Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Stan Bumgarner, and I've been privileged to serve the Unitarian Universalist Church of Clarksville for the last 15 years as their regular speaker. And in that time, I began to really appreciate and understand what an extraordinary woman that Jill Eichhorn was. And when looking back, how much I learned from her. I'm deeply honored that Jill's husband, my dear friend Barry Kitterman, asked me to be here today to lead this celebration of service, the celebration of life service. So, on behalf of the Kittermans, Barry, Hannah, and Ted, who is not able to be with us because they're expecting a child at any minute, and Jill's siblings, Linda, Tom, Tim, and all the Eichhorns that are with us. On behalf of everyone, we'd like to say thank you for being here today. And we'd like to thank the university for all the people that have helped, stepped up, and made this happen, all the people in IT and sound and communications that have been working to make this what it is. Thank you very much. And finally, the UU Church family, who's shown so much support and love and caring in the last few days. So if you would please, I'm going to ask you to join me in a moment of silence in reflection of your experiences with Jill, but also in the reflection of the people around us and connecting with them. So just a moment of silence, and then I'll say a prayer. Divine Spirit, give us faith that will protect us from despair and cynicism. Give us such love for creation and all humankind as will blot out all judgment, hatred, and bitterness. Give us such hope that will deliver us from fear and faint-heartedness. And finally, give us comfort in times of loss so that we can comfort and help each other. Amen. So looking out in the auditorium today, it makes it clear that Jill touched many people over the course of her life. And at the visitation last night at our church, I had opportunity to talk to many different people that I'd never met, and I heard so many stories of her kindness and compassion, her sharing of wise counsel with students and friends. And one of the things that emerged as I talked to different people after they shared how they met Jill and what they learned from her, almost to the person, they said, and we just became friends. I'm sure there are hundreds of Jill stories that we could tell today, and all the friends that are here. Unfortunately, there's not enough time for us all who would like to share to do so. Let's all agree then that we will tell Jill's stories for years to come. And that is how we will keep her essence alive, how we will keep her spirit present in our lives. For today, for this afternoon, there are family members, 2 former students, and 2 colleagues who would like to share with you their thoughts and experiences about Jill. And I'm going to ask Jill's daughter, Hannah, to come up now.
I would like us all to take a collective deep breath. In and out, in and out. My mother was a devoted student to the idea that your breath is the strongest tool in your toolbox, alongside always having a water bottle handy. So, having a hard day, breathe. Feeling anxious or overwhelmed, breathe. Having a hard time breathing, see a doctor and also breathe. I can't count the number of times she gave me that advice. The number would be infinite. It worked though, like most of Mom's advice. I say most because she once told me that flaxseed oil would taste just as good as maple syrup, and the jury is still out on that one. That was one of the things I always admired about her, one of the countless others. Her endless drive and willingness to advise. To my friends, to her students, to me and my brother, to anyone who asked and sometimes didn't ask. She was one of the helpers. It would sometimes not be welcome, and she could sense that, but her intent was always to give her perspective, which is that the person she was talking to had so many options in front of them and had a brilliant future no matter which one they took. Over the years, some of her former students have come up and said, "Thank you. Thank you for sharing your mom with us." This gratitude has always stuck with me because it speaks of my mom's presence in the lives of people I do not know, that she was important and needed, and not just by me. That's something that is really cool to get to understand as a daughter, but it is also hard because it means I know how you are all feeling. When you lose someone who has made an impact on your life, it cuts deeply, no matter the relationship. So I want you all to breathe with me, and through the sadness, let us remember what an uncontainable joy it was to know Jill Elizabeth Eichhorn. She was breathtaking, she was warm, and she was also the only person I have ever known to ruin 3 crock pots in the span of a year. I would like to share a poem that meant so much to my mom by Joy Harjo. To pray you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you, and know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments steadily growing, and in languages that aren't always sound but other circles of motion. Like eagle that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky and wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, see ourselves, and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion, like eagle rounding out the morning inside us. We pray that it will be done in beauty, in beauty. From my brother, my father, and I want to thank all of you for loving Jill. She kicked ass.
We would ask that Tim and Tom come up now, or Tim? No.
Thank you. It's nice of all of you to join us here today. I would echo both Stan's words and Hannah's that we're thankful that you're here. And I think this is, well, I had lots of discussions with Jill, and this would be the universe reflecting back here what she reflected out. And I think she would agree with that. I wrote something just short, thoughts on my sister Jill. I love my sister. For my entire life, she was really my guiding light. She protected me from my brother when I gave him his bloody nose. We boys tended to be a little more violent back in those days, but we mended ourselves. Jill was always a peacekeeper between us. Jill also had the best music in the house. I borrowed her 45s and her albums. They were priceless. And I'll probably tap into some older folks here, but for you younger kids, I'd suggest you look up Jim Croce, Carole King, James Taylor, Seals and Croft, Monkees, Beatles, Breads, and others. We connected through music. Later on, as our parents' health issues began to wane, we connected through music again, listening to the Beach Boys probably way too much when we took our frequent trips to Indiana to help our parents. I love those trips because they were an opportunity to again connect with my sister and to work with her. We had really good chemistry. Jill was always loving to me, as I'm sure she was to many of you. Jill was a lesson in how to be a beautiful human being. We often talked about the ills of the world and how to fix them. Sadly, we have not been able to enact any of those remedies. I will miss those talks. I won't delve much into politics here, but Jill and I held common view on women's health choice, women's rights, as well as those of minorities. There is little daylight between us. Jill's loving and disarming approach to these issues is something we should aspire to and to carry forward. If we can memorialize Jill in any way, it would be to act on behalf of those that are less fortunate and give voice to those that need to be heard, and do so with kindness and with love. I will miss your energy, your charm, your love, and your counsel. I will miss coffee and yoga and staying on the phone for way too long. I wanted so much to go to Ted's and play in Lake Michigan with you. You've left a great hole in this plane of existence, and my heart is broken. But I know wherever you are, your divine spirit is serving and lifting up others, because that is what your spirit intended to do.
I would like to thank everyone for coming here to this celebration of Jill's life. She was a wonderful sister. Her humanity and her loving way about her was good for all the people, and particularly her family, me being very included. I think the people here know her. She gave, she loved, and she will live in heaven, I'm sure. I just have a few words. I love my sister because she loved me. She was an exceptionally excellent sister, primarily because of her service, sacrifice, courage, and devotion. She will be greatly missed. I am sure that she is on the rapid rail to heaven. She will live with us, as will my mother, father, in spirit and service. Thank you.
Almost 20 years ago, I was a student in Jill's women's writers class. I took a lot of her women's studies classes, and eventually I was her graduate assistant. I was a very quiet student. In that first women's writers class, Jill had us keep a reading journal, and I filled it with notes and thoughts and ideas. And it was through engaging with me in that journal that she helped me find my voice. I know a lot of you are nodding right now because she helped you to find your voice. It was kind of her thing. She encouraged me to keep writing and to share when I was ready. Jill made her students feel safe and protected. When I came out that next year, it was Jill who gave me a safe space to share my story. She let me know I would be okay, that I would have a community, and that I would always have her. I wouldn't have had the courage to come out if she hadn't been there. She was always there when I needed her from that very first class on. Jill always went above and beyond to ensure a person she loved had what they needed, felt encouraged, felt loved, felt valued, because that's who she was, selfless and thoughtful and love personified.
We forgot to introduce ourselves. This is Joey Grisham, and I'm Jenny Harris. And for anyone that knows me, you know that public speaking is not a strength of mine. But if there's anyone who would give me the courage to stand up here, it's Jill. And if there's anyone I would have the courage to stand up here to speak about, it's Jill. I've spent half my life knowing and loving Jill. Every big moment I can recall, she's been a part of. I had Jill as a professor of English composition in the early 2000s. She was enthusiastic and thoughtful, and I knew I wanted to be in her presence and learn everything she had to share, so I enrolled in Vagina Monologues for the spring semester. As a 19-year-old that grew up in the pews of a Southern Baptist church, I thought, oh no. What have I gotten myself into? But Jill created opportunities to learn in a safe environment, and she fed my curiosity and growth as a student. After that course, I took the Intro to Women's and Gender Studies course. Then I took a Women's Writers course and a Women in Film course with her. When I was in her office one day, Jill said, "You know, you're halfway through completing a minor in Women's and Gender Studies, so you should consider adding it." I told her I had already declared a minor, and she looked at me and said with her hands as she did, "Well, you can have two." Of course, I did become a Women's and Gender Studies minor. Then in 2007, Jill asked me to attend the National Women's Studies Association annual conference with her right outside Chicago. She solicited me to interview students about their experiences performing in Vagina Monologues, and she planned to show that video as part of her panel discussion. It was the first time I had ever attended a professional conference, and I was humbled that she wanted to include something I had contributed. Upon reflection, I also fully recognized she needed me to work the technology for her. But I'm still grateful for the opportunity she provided. On the way to Chicago, our flight was delayed due to severe weather. When we finally took off, we ran into a bit of turbulence. I didn't say anything, but Jill could tell I was nervous, and she leaned over at one point and rubbed my wrist with lavender essential oils. Whether it worked or not, I don't know, but I felt better just because Jill was there beside me. She had such a calming presence.
Looking back, Jenny and I can say that Jill has been part of every major milestone in our adult lives. We have a picture of her on our wedding day holding a sparkler high in the air, smiling radiantly. When we told her we were having a baby, she assured me I could do it my way. I could have a midwife, I could have a natural birth, I could nurse as long as I wanted. Whenever I had questions, she had a book, an essay, a personal anecdote to share with me. She even booked me prenatal massages. I felt so supported by her every step of the way. And the day after we brought our daughter Lennon home from the hospital, Jill showed up to stock our fridge. She had a reason for every single item and explained why each thing was important. Jenny and I both deserved ice cream, she said. Everything Jill did was intentional, considerate. Before she left that day, she made me some tea. It smelled kind of funny. It had leaves in it, maybe some twigs. It did not look good, and I did not want to drink it. But I said I'd try it because Jill told me to. She said it was what my body needed. It was good for healing, for lactation, for sleep. Jenny leaned over and asked how it tasted, and I said, it tastes like something I mixed up in my backyard when I was a kid, but I'm gonna drink every drop because Jill told me to, and there isn't anything that I wouldn't do if she told me to do it, because I knew she had my best interest in mind. Jill was my mentor, my role model, my teacher, the mother I aspired to be like. She was my friend. And oh, how lucky I was. How lucky we all were to have her.
Just a couple months ago, Jill bought tickets for us to attend the production of The Color Purple at the Roxy. She said it was a reward for receiving tenure. I met her there, and as she walked up, she leaned forward and said, I hope it's okay, I brought Barry. I somehow ended up sitting between them, and I remember feeling so content to be there in that moment with two people I loved and admired, and who had played such a pivotal role in my journey into adulthood. It's clear that Jill Eichhorn had a tremendous impact on everyone who had the privilege of knowing her. Like Joey and so many others here, Jill was my professor and my mentor. She was a mother figure to me, a surrogate grandparent to our daughter, and most of all, she was my friend. She always had wise words to add to any conversation, and I was filled with pride and happiness anytime I had the privilege to share space with her. There are no words to describe the immense void that we are all feeling. And as I thought of what to say to you all, to Barry, to Hannah, as we try to think of how to navigate living in a world without Jill, I came across an email she sent to me and her capstone course students in May 2020, just shortly after the pandemic began. Another scary time she helped our family through. And what better words to share than those of our beloved Jill? She wrote, I know the future may feel bleak and uncertain at this point, but hope is around you. Look for it. We are not alone. You are not alone. It has been an honor to witness your journey and to learn from you. I am always your ally, Jill. Thank you.
Today we celebrate the life of my dear friend and colleague of more than 25 years. Jill Eichhorn, beloved wife and mother, sister, teacher, mentor, colleague, and friend. What a bright and beautiful light she has been among us. As a teacher and mentor to hundreds of students in the Women's and Gender Studies program, Jill advocated quietly but fiercely for her students. She inspired and empowered her students, helping them to find their voice, and for many, helping them to find their path toward healing. As a beloved friend and colleague, Jill was the wise voice of calm, compassion, courage, and strength, and she brought out the very best in all of us. She made our department better. She made the university better. And she made our community a better place by her presence. Jill's longtime friend and former chair, Susan Calavini, writes that Jill took a fledgling women's and gender studies program and made it a force for good in the world. It is no surprise, writes Susan, that one of her favorite poems was Joy Harjo's Eagle poem, with its central lines, "We must take the utmost care and kindness in all things." This is how Jill approached others and the world. Her care and kindness will be deeply missed by all who loved her, but how grateful we are that she was in the world, and how grateful we are to have known her. I know that Jill's light will continue to shine on brightly in all our hearts.
I've been thinking about how lucky Jill's students are. How lucky to sit in a classroom and learn from her. And I've also been thinking that we are all Jill's students, aren't we? And as Jill's students, we know that her teaching style was a subtle one, a quietly powerful one in keeping with her personality. I remember a visit I had with Jill in about 1994, 95, when she and Barry were living in St. Bethlehem. She invited me to come over with my oldest child, Patrick, for a play date with Teddy and a mom talk. This is before Sweet Hannah and my other two children were born. Teddy, who's a little older than Patrick, had graduated from the potty training phase, and Patrick wasn't quite there yet, which he demonstrated onto the carpet. As you can imagine, Jill didn't miss a beat, just smiled and helped me tidy up the wet spot while she went on talking, or more likely patiently listened to me while I went on talking. I remember that detail about that day, and I also remember that Jill had offered me a cup of hot water to drink. She offered other things too, of course, but what I remember most vividly is that cup of hot water, which I sipped as we talked. She explained that she and Barry had learned that custom while they were in China. I had never heard of that or thought of it, but after my visit with Jill, I took up the habit and still do it to this day. That's one of the many things I learned from Jill, and it's typical of what she taught me and of the way she taught me the warmth and simple comfort of a mug of hot water, best enjoyed in the company of a friend. Jill's way of teaching was subtle, unfussy, easy to hear and take in if you listened. How many times have you left a conversation with Jill, a meeting, a yoga class, a phone conversation, and thought later, driving home or drifting off to sleep, oh, that's what Jill was saying. That's what she was teaching me, because she was never didactic, never forceful. Jill also was never petty or superficial, and believe me, I tried hard to get her to be. She was always mindful, present, intentional. These are yoga words that I suppose are part of any mindfulness practice, but they were more than words for Jill. She lived them. Fairly recently, Jill came to my office after a meeting and said, I wanted to say something about that topic, but I couldn't get my thoughts together fast enough. Later, I realized that what Jill was really saying was, I wanted to make sure I spoke thoughtfully. If she couldn't speak thoughtfully and mindfully, she just wasn't going to speak. I never once heard Jill say anything unkind about anybody. And to my mind, even if that's the only thing we said about Jill today, and of course it's far from the only thing, that would be enough to mark a well-lived life. Jill called out injustices, certainly, made critiques when they were needed, but she never did it unkindly, and she never made it personal. I want to be more like her. I miss her, and I will miss her every day for the rest of my life, but I will also be listening for the lessons she still has to teach me.
I've only known Jill about 5 years or so, and she came across as the most humble, dedicated servant at church, learning how to play recorder. And that's all I knew about her until the years went by, and especially recently reading the obituary of her life of service and dedication. It just blows me away. So this is dedicated to her mission in life.
Thank you, Kim. So I was about 17 or 18. The very first time I experienced a shooting star. Now, I'd known about them for a while, but I grew up in the city and there was always a lot of light pollution, so you never got to see the brilliance of that. And when I was 17, I was out on the farm with a friend of mine, and we were just sitting on the back of the truck talking, and a shooting star came right over our heads. And I swear it looked like it couldn't have been more than 15 or 20 feet above us. And I turned around to see where it was going to land. At that point, I realized I have just experienced a shooting star. I'd known about it before, but that was the real event. Now, I've known teachers and mentors who change lives. I've even had more than a few in my own life, but I never experienced a person like Jill Eichhorn until I was able to observe her week after week, month after month, year after year, selflessly dedicating herself to our church. Her humility, her intellect, her wisdom, her compassion and kindness, her sense of humor, and her dogged commitment to learning how to play the recorder. And over the years of knowing Jill, we became friends. Both my wife, Kim, and I cherish the time that we had with Jill and Barry, and are left in shock at the suddenness of her death, and left with questions like, why? Or how could this happen? And in the end, we just hold each other in disbelief, accepting the ways of the divine are a mystery, and that life can be infinitely beautiful and tragically painful in the same moment. What I struggle with the most is how could such a kind, sweet person, a person dedicated to gender equality, social justice, the empowerment of women and others, LGBTQ rights, is taken from us far too soon, while others who oppose everything she fought for are still around. It's beyond comprehension, and it doesn't make sense to me. So we are all left with our memories of her and recognition of how she changed us, changed my consciousness, helped me understand the world in a very different way than when I first met her. Now, after our church service last Sunday, we decided we'd have a circle and everybody would be able to share their thoughts and feelings about losing Jill. And we asked people to share from their hearts. And there were tears, but it didn't take long for those tears to become laughter. And one church member said, after watching how kind and tolerant and compassionate Jill is with everyone she met, he decided he would begin to view dealing with other difficult people through the lens of, what would Jill do? And he jokingly said, WWJD. Brings a whole new meaning to that. Tim said it best, I think. Those of us who were left behind with just the memories of Jill are called to honor her work No matter what our gifts are, no matter what theater in which we operate our lives, we are called to be compassionate, to work toward justice, to do the work that she was doing, because otherwise we begin to question whether the moral arc of the universe bends towards justice. Each of us has her spirit and ours. Each of us has learned something from her, and each of us is called to move forward in our own way to make a difference. And I'd like to conclude this way with a reading from the Talmud, and then invite everyone to go into the lobby and enjoy some tea and cookies and such, and just being together in community. But do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justly now. Love mercy now. Walk humbly now. You're not obligated to complete the work. Neither are you free to abandon it. So go in peace, feel our sadness, and know that the laughter will come as we share these stories about Jill over and over and over. Thanks for being here today.